Hello there and welcome back to another review. So today, following on from my 36th Chambers of Shaolin review, I thought we'd have a look at the sequel today. Reviewing this from this luxurious Shaw Brothers Volume 2 box set from Arrow Video, which you really should pick up if you're into your Shaw Brothers or your old school Kung Fu movies. There's a lot of classic movies to be enjoyed there. But we're going to be looking at Return to the 36th Chambers today, which is very much more of a light-hearted film compared to the first one. In many ways, it actually sort of mocks the first film. It sort of pokes it a little bit, sort of lampoons it, not by much, but just in small little subtle ways. It does sort of play into that idea. Made in 1980, so this is a full 2 years after the original 36th Chamber of Shaolin. While it is sort of connected as such, it is not like a follow-on, as Gordon Liu plays a completely different character in this film, and of course directed by the maestro, that is Kar-leung. Now, I think a lot of people compare this film very almost unfavourably to the first one. I think a lot of people, the general consensus with this film is like, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as the first movie. Like, it's good, but it's not great. And personally, for me, there was a time when actually I preferred this movie to the first one. I think this is very underrated compared to the first one. Because, with me, my list is I can never just make a list of 1 to 5. This is my favourite, that is my least favourite. Because whenever I do that, it's always changing. Like I'll think, that's my favourite, and then 2-3 days later, it's completely changed, and it's a different movie on the top of the list entirely. But there was a time when I actually ranked this better than 36 Chamber of Shaolin, because I think there's a lot to be enjoyed here, and strictly mainly because why I enjoy it so much is because of the light-hearted tone that takes place. It's a lot more of a comedy film. There's not like there's a huge amount at stake in this movie, but it has the 36 Chamber sort of idea there, the 36 Chamber premise, but Kar-leung and Gordon Liu put a totally different spin on it. Which is full credit to them. It would have been so easy for them to just repeat themselves and be like, right, okay, let's do another training kung fu movie, and our hero has to rise up against the Manchus. And don't get me wrong, at the core in this movie, that is what this film still is, but it just feels very fresh and it feels very different. He puts enough of a spin and ideas into it that it feels very fresh in contrast to what had come before. As I say, I really enjoy this movie. I think in many ways it's unfairly overshadowed by the previous one. You could argue that maybe Kar-leung might have been somewhat intimidated by the 36 Chambers of Shaolin reputation, so just sort of decided to go against what that film was in certain ways, in certain themes that he does. When you look at a thing when this was made 2 years after, it's not like, say, Snake and the Eagle's Shadow, with Yuen Woo-ping and Jackie Chan, where that was a huge success and they followed it up immediately with Drunken Master. Here, like I say, Kar-leung had a big hit. He had a big hit with 36 Chambers, and he waited 2 years before he done a sequel. And not only that, but with the sequel, he gave you something completely what you wasn't expecting. They waited a full 2 years, and I think the whole idea with the comedy and the structure of the film and the way it plays, I think it was just to go against audience preconceptions and what they're expecting the film to be, because they could have easily just done copying, and so many filmmakers do that with sequels and things like that. They'll something that's successful, a film that's a big hit, they'll simply copy and paste it. In the sequel, it'll just be exactly the same film, couple of new characters, fresh coat of paint. It's the same movie, really. Here, Kar-leung is brave enough to say, okay, I'll do a sequel to that, but I'm going to do a completely different idea for a movie. And I think to that end, the film does deserve some praise, just for the boldness of what the filmmaker Kar-leung is doing here, and just trying to inject something new to it. Gordon Liu's character in this one is sort of a con man, and even pretends to be Santee at one point in this movie, lampooning the guy he was actually playing in the previous movie, which is quite an interesting concept when you think about it. The guy Gordon Liu's playing in this movie is pretending to be the guy he was in the first movie, even though the guy who was in the first movie is in this movie, but he's played by somebody else, and Gordon Liu's playing somebody else. So if that all makes sense to you, let's get into the review. So we meet Brother Sheng, who operates this dye mill, and the dye the dye they are using, and the whole production has got worse. The Manchus and people in charge are going to dock their pay and have some of their other fellow Manchus come in to oversee the production, to ensure the work is done. So there's this daimyo, the Manchus are sort of taking over, they're about to run it, and it's sort of their mill. Look out for Hsiao here in this movie with some extremely large teeth, and it's often, usually in old school kung fu movies, do you ever notice there's always somebody, always one person, even if it's just a brief role or a student in the background, there's always one of them that's got big teeth, like sort of the big fake teeth. If you look at like Sammo Hung in Hand of Death, that's another fine example, and Hsiao here, just massive, great big buck teeth, which seems to be very sort of kung fu standard. So the worker's being unhappy, of course. A fight breaks out with the boss, and he's such a reasonable guy. He says, if you strike, I'm going to break your legs. So that's one way to put fear into your employees, I suppose. If you're going to strike, I'm going to break your legs. So, you know, there we go. They think about suing him, and they can't do that as he is in like a high position. And they will get beaten if they don't work. They don't have a union or anything like that. So they're screwed. Basically, these workers of this daimyo, they're completely and utterly screwed. And that's all the plot premise is, really. It's just this daimyo overtaken by the Manchus. They're sort of being mean and nasty to the workforce. And that is it. That is really the whole drive of the whole plot here. We meet RG, Lou's character. He's sort of friends with the worker. And as I mentioned, his day-to-day life, he's sort of like a con man of sorts. So after luring some of the Manchus into the forest, they get RG to pretend to be Santee to sort of threaten them, pretending, of course, that he has like godly kung fu skills, and he can, like, the whole idea is that they can install a bit of fear into the Manchus to make them think twice about what they're doing. It's all an act, like I say. He's a con man with what he does, but it does say there's a lot of fun to be had here, especially with the comedy. And Gordon Liu, as I say, is just fantastic in this movie, as you would expect. So they pretend he's got like godly kung fu skills. I do like when Chief Ma is like, how much do you want? One of the chiefs, like the Manchus, is taken out. He says like, how much do you want for your cause, right? And sort of like thinking he's collecting. So he will like leave them alone. And Gordon Liu, for a brief second, actually considered it. Like, you know, you see the look on his face, and he's sort of, actually, hold on, I could make a profit here. Thinking, you know, I didn't think of that. But he doesn't obviously do that. But it's just wonderful, that little moment where he thinks, actually, how much have you got? After some very great theatrics involving wires, he gives them payback. Their main boss, Wang Lung-wei's character, wants to see the monk's skill for himself, because, as I say, it's all a show. It's all like theatrics, and he's not really. Obviously, Gordon Liu's character hasn't got kung fu skills, but Wang Lung-wei, the boss, he wants to see the skills for himself. After he does, he susses that he is an imposter, as was like using his arms to sense it, but he basically just uses his arms, and his friends sort of jump back, pretending he's got like these sort of mystical, godly superhero powers, but it's all an act. Sending him flight, using wires to shut the door when he comes in as well at one point. Anyway, he gets found out, and they all get beaten senseless. And it's a bit rich that I always found it a bit rich that they blame RG for what's happened. Like, they blame him. Like one, it wasn't his idea, and two, he was only trying to help. So he only got roped into this, and they sort of blame him for it, like he didn't, because he screwed it all up. It wasn't his fault. Like, Gordon Liu's character was just trying to help you. You know, it was your idea. I was just doing what you asked me to do because you're a friend, and then they sort of blame him for it, which I thought was a bit, even now watching it again recently, it's a bit rich. So Brother Sheng is like, look, why don't you do something useful to help us, right? He doesn't have to, Gordon Liu. He can easily just say, well, it's your problem. I don't work at the dye mill. So what does he do? Of course, he goes to the Shaolin Temple. So the whole motive and plot and setup and drive for Gordon Liu going to the Shaolin Temple is completely different to the first movie. There's no revenge story. There's no... Okay, like I said, there is elements of, like, the Manchus there, a bit of oppression and things like that. But here, the whole premise and setup for him going to the temple is completely different. That's why he wants to learn Kung Fu. So the urgency and what has happened, though, serious as such, is not as serious. There is something at stake, but it's not sort of as sort of played out where it's ultra urgent, ultra serious. It is sort of dialed back a little bit. you see, they're going largely to learn kung fu to settle a pay dispute. Basically, is what he's doing. It's just a pay dispute. Is why he's going to learn kung fu. And what is great is he just tries to get in any way possible. You know, like in the first movie, they accept him right away. They get in and they're like, "Why didn't you say you wanted to learn kung fu?" But in this movie, he tries to get in any way possible. He finds these monks and puts some grain on it, like he puts some grain on his head so he looks like he has the monk sort of burn marks. Even goes so far as to slip one of the monks a laxative in his tea. And the whole idea being there while the monk is busy for number two, RG can sort of take his place. So he's doing anything necessary. I mean, he's using laxatives in this thing to make a monk have the runs, and here, like I say, I don't think that would have probably happened in the first movie, as I say, because the tone is completely different. Of course, they chuck him out. Now, in the first film, they accepted him, like I mentioned, quite happily. In this one, they just throw him out right away. That's why the 36 Chamber was so cool, because when the monks just accept him, that goes against sort of what you expect, because usually in a kung fu movie, it's like they've got to prove their worth, why they want to join the temple. In this movie, it follows that. Like they don't accept him right away. But the first one, they take him in no problem. He uses some straw, makes like a wig, and goes to sneak in again, where these monks are having to walk down the corridor with like booby traps under the sand. RG manages to cross, however, by holding onto the back of this other monk. Then the next test, he has to punch through the small, like, wooden altar with a door in to place some incense sticks. Like, they got to punch through this wooden door and place these incense sticks, and he has trouble doing that completely. Like, he can't. He's doing all this, and just in the hope he will just randomly fit in and you know, be acknowledged. In a funny sort of way in this movie, he never really is accepted as such as well. When you watch the movie, it's not like there's ever an official, "You are now a student at this temple." There's never an official scene where like an abbot or a senior monk says, "You are now one of us," or anything like that. He's basically just winging it the whole time in this movie. He's just trying to fit into the temple any way he possibly can. At least it seems like he isn't accepted anyway. He then goes into the practice chamber where he slips on some like tiles, and we meet the new Santee, played by I think King-chu plays Santee in this movie. Now, a bulk of the movie, when he's got into the temple, a bulk of the movie is watching RG like trying to clean his hair. This goes on for quite a while. You don't really see a hell of an amount of like chambers in this movie. And when I talk about cleaning his hair, which involves throwing a rock tied with a rope over and over again into this like well, he manages to clean it in the end, even though it is a terrible wig he's sort of constructed. So we've had him pretending to be like a chief abbot, we've had laxatives, we've had wig cleaning. I mean, when I say this is a very different movie to the first one, it really is, just for what's involved, and especially in the tone, if nothing else. So after letting RG know that he has been living in as an imposter, Santee says you can pay it off in your lodging fees by building some scaffolding around the temple for renovation. All the while he's doing this, he is watching the monks in the chamber below practice. And this is really the only sort of set you see in terms of the temple and the practice area. It's only really this area that they use. Kar-leung doesn't go where you're seeing this chamber, that chamber, this chamber. You're only really seeing one part. Which I think is the 36th chamber. I believe that he is actually in at this point. I think it's the 36th. I could be wrong. So you don't really get to see much of the other chambers, which, you know, it's very much a one area type of film. Where the first film, you sort of journey through the temple with him. Like I said to you in that review, I could have stayed with that, like Gordon Liu in that temple in the 36 chambers forever. You know, them training scenes, they could have gone on much longer. It's a 2-hour movie, but it could have gone even longer if Kar-leung decided it wanted to. Here is very much in this chamber, this chamber courtyard and around it for like the duration of the film. Like I say, it's very much one area. So he takes his time, as it takes him over a year to finish all this scaffolding. All the while he's using like his skills like that he sees and picks up to help him with his work. So after completing it, Santee is like, you can tear it down now and then leave. Right, so he like I mentioned, he hasn't really been accepted. He's come in, he, you know, done all this, tried to blag his way in. Then we had like him trying to clean his wig in this well. Then he's like had to put up scaffolding and things like that. So he's put up all this scaffolding, and he's like, and the abbot's like, right, you can take it down now and leave. Right, you're done. So during this time he's been putting up the scaffolding, he's actually run through some of the trials of the chamber, and Santee has had like an odd smile on his face. According to us and him, he didn't teach him nothing, as far as we know, and he has not helped him learn kung fu in the slightest. So he leaves, and as an audience member, you're thinking, well, he hasn't learned any kung fu. Like, there's been nothing there where we've had no training. He's left all disappointed. It's not like we've had, it's not been acknowledged that he's learned kung fu. It's not clear if he's learned kung fu. So he catches up with the workforce from earlier and learns they are still struggling and now like desolate labourers and things like that. We learn that it's been 3 years since he left and they can't believe he's learned nothing. Even he doesn't want to tell them, as he is ashamed that he still has no kung fu skills whatsoever. Now, I thought that was quite interesting as well, just that idea that he's come out and he's like, I've learned nothing. I know I'm still just as bad as I was before I went in. And I think it's quite clever and novel in the sense that he, like I say, he has no idea that during his scaffolding completion that he has actually learned kung fu with what he's been doing. That's why the abbot, Santi, gives that brief smile. If you watch the film, when he leaves, there's this brief smile on his face as though to say, you're a good student. After his friends sort of attack him, he realises that Gordon Liu does actually know kung fu. He goes back to the daimyo like a chief monk again to kick their asses basically with his new scaffolding kung fu, as it's sort of known. Going so far as to tie one of the guy's hands together so tight that it makes his wrist bleed, and tying their bow staffs up, and has a collection of bamboo fibres that he uses as his new weapon of choice to do all the tying up, which is quite a novel thing. A lot of kung fu movies, they always try and have a novelty, don't they, like a style or something that just sets the film apart. And this film, make no mistake, with scaffolding kung fu, it's about as original as it gets, isn't it, in terms of old school kung fu movies. So he lures Wang Lung-wei away from the factory out to this barren landscape, and him and his men sort of use like bench kung fu, which is quite cool. He leads them to like this scaffolding building construction site. So they sort of like on his territory now. It's like, right, scaffolding. I know that I can use that. He's lured them where he can use the surroundings to his advantage. And they can fight, like he can fight on his terms now, and it is very inventive. And of course, he beats the guys up, and he gets their wages back. But and that's sort of the end of the movie. Sort of crash through it like a little bit, like I always sometimes do. Always seem to just crash through some of these plots sometimes. But it's a very, very light kung fu movie, and if you look at this, I think it's very unfair to just which one's better, Return or the original? Return or original? Stick to just viewing this as a film in its own, and you'll have a much better time. Whilst maybe not as classic as the first film, I still think the entertainment factor is incredibly high. I mean, not many films where you see scaffolding kung fu, as I say, and I think it's a great sequel. And as I say, often overlooked, often overshadowed by the great masterpiece that is the first one. But if you've seen the first one, please don't expect exactly the same. Expect something a bit more light-hearted, a bit more fun, and probably I'd say go as far as to say a bit more inventive as well, but with a fantastic performance from Gordon Liu. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.